Well, folklore is a body of oral traditional wisdom or knowledge or superstition, and it's like the weave of a culture, of a local culture, of a native culture. So you'd have plant lore, or you could have bird lore or animal lore and weather lore, and this is all part of the way people in a particular society, communal society, are looking at the world. And then for entertainment you have folk tales, and so those are the things that make up what we call folklore. Well, folklore is very central to the Irish culture. It's a peasant art form, I suppose, the way Irish traditional music is. Usually it's associated with telling by the fire. It's been described as a theatre up the fireside. So there are two types of stories in folklore. There are the myths and legends, which are pre-Christian. They were written down, we have them in manuscript form. And then folklore, as it's more commonly known, would be folk tales, and they would be from the last few hundred years, and they would be the ghost tales and the banshee tales and the tales that echo similar storytelling in other parts of the world. After independence, in 1935, the Folklore Commission was set up, and they began to very seriously and scientifically collect stories and musical tunes from all around the country. A very important thing is Din Shankas, the Lord of Place Names. And here we are in Glendalough, the glen of the two lakes. And there are stories, Christian stories of St. Kevin, who is very famously associated with this place. So there's a vast amount of folklore in the collections of the folklore department, the biggest in the world outside of Finland. So we're famous for it, and I think rightly so.
My name is Christa McClerie. I'm the Director of the National Folklore Collection at UCD. Here at the National Folklore Collection, our responsibility is to look after what we call a tradition archive. And these are recordings of folklore made from as early as the 1920s. And they're in the form of manuscript transcriptions and also sound recordings and also photographs.
In the Folklore Archive we have manuscripts, we have photographs, but for me the audio recordings are just fabulous. I mean, obviously if you can read a story, it's powerful, but when you hear the voice, and you can hear, particularly the older recordings that go back to 1898, our older recordings, you just hear these voices coming back from way back, and you hear the intonation, you hear the language, you hear the accent, you hear the vocabulary, and it just brings the whole thing alive. Now, not all the people we recorded were, I mean, none of them were professional storytellers. These were ordinary people in their own homes telling stories.
When you come to video, again, that's even greater still, because you can see the physical gestures that people make when they're telling a story, like the way I'm using my hands at the moment, for instance, the facial expressions, the shift from, you know, sadness to joy, whatever, fear, all of those aspects of expression. So most of the manuscripts, to summarize, are transcriptions of interviews in which people are telling stories, folk tales, legends, also talking about local place names and local customs, traditions, and so on. Then we have a large collection of books, such as you see around us here. We have over 55,000 books. Then we have a collection of photographs that runs to well over 80,000 photographs, prints, negatives, transparencies, glass plates, lantern slides. And then we have what we call the sound archive.
I'm lucky to work in the sound archive, so I get to listen to all the recordings that were made from the 1930s onwards. And we're still recording, we're still collecting folklore. And it's not all the old stuff. We have interviews here talking about fishing traditions and house making, buildings, the whole vernacular architecture side of things, how we did things in Ireland. And it covers every aspect of Irish life: food, clothing, all these aspects of Irish life.
I suppose the oldest medium is the written medium, the handwritten, and that's where you listen to what somebody has to say and you write down as accurately as possible what they have to say, and it's preserved on paper, on parchment. Another method is a more complete method in some ways is the use of audio recording.
I mean, initially in the early days, the Commission had very valuable wax cylinders, and they knew they had to preserve them because they weren't going to last long. So these were played and copied onto tapes, and this was preserving them. So obviously we moved on from that. So the bulk of our collection is on 1/4-inch tape actually. So now with new digitization methods, we obviously we digitize all our recordings, or we're getting through them. You have to do them in real time. So if a tape is an hour long, it's going to take an hour to digitize. You can't speed that up.
Yeah, Dukas is our digital platform, and it's where we publish content from the collection. The process of digitization is quite a difficult one. On the one hand, you have to scan, you have to capture an image. If it's a manuscript page, you can use a flatbed scanner, you can use a book scanner. There's a variety of different scanners, but that's only your first step. You then have to create your metadata or metadata, and this is, the name of the pupil who recorded this, their age where possible, the school they attended, their home address, and then the details of the person from whom the information was recorded.
So they started 3 years ago when we did the schools collection, and that's up online, and now we were going to hopefully get onto the main manuscript collection, and we've also put up some of the photographs. And down the line we'll get the audio and the visual. I keep saying, hey, what about my stuff? That has to go up too. But it will, because people love to hear the stuff, and it will get up there eventually, but it just needs the background of, the technical side of that is quite complicated. So they'll take it in little stages. We'll do the manuscripts, and then we'll be in a position then to take on the other material.
My name is Mark O'Geroin. I'm the experience manager for the National Leprechaun Museum. Well, we here at the National Leprechaun Museum think it's really important to preserve and keep the stories going. And for us, it's about actively doing that. It's about telling the stories every day. I mean, we're open the museum for the last 8 years. We only close on Christmas Day. We have hundreds of people coming in every day, and we're constantly telling those stories.
Preserving folklore is really important, and the work that the folklorists and the Department of Folklore in UCD and in Cork and in Galway is absolutely fantastic. The old stories are recorded, they're written down, they're written about in books, they're there to be examined, looked at either on the page or on tape, but they're dead unless they're spoken.
I think it's really important for larger bodies to actually document the information and get it down on paper, get it down digitally. But once that's done, it's put away. So I think it's really important to do that. But if we just did that and we didn't tell the stories, there'd be no point. And if we just told the stories and didn't preserve what had gone before, there'd be no point really to that either. I think the two work hand in hand really well.
My motivation is to take the stories out of the folklore departments, take the stories from the books, let them live again, tell them in a live situation to people who then hopefully might tell them to somebody else. So very often you see the stories coming round and around, but every time a story's told, it's different because the person who's telling it is different.
In the museum, technology has never been the focus, but it enhances the experience for us, the storytellers, and for our audience coming in. Like through the museum, we use projectors with the Giants Room to project a fire, just to give it that feel, to make it more authentic. So it's not just about the words and the imaginations. You need to give people key bits of the puzzle for them to put it all together. The misconceptions around Irish folklore and around the museum have actually kind of worked in our favour an awful lot. Even as I said, the name, the Leprechaun Museum, is set out, not to trick people as such, but to play on a preconceived idea they already have. And we've been asked over the years, well, would we not have gone with a name like the National Folklore Museum or the National Storytelling Experience, and I think they would have attracted particular audiences, and we want to open it up to a broader range of people. So while it could be seen as being misleading, we won't give a ticket to anyone until they know what it is, what we do. And by engaging with people online, that allows us to get the idea out there better. But the name has always worked because it plays into people's misconceptions.
We in Ireland are very, very fortunate that people in the original department of folklore, the Delargis and all those people who work so hard to set up this collection, have recorded our stories, because there are many, many countries in Europe where the stories weren't recorded. And Ireland is unique in that, because we had control over our new republic, the decision to record the old stories was taken officially. We're the envy of a lot of countries for that.
There were these two shepherds, and they had spent a hard day rounding up their sheep. And in the evening, tired, they came to this little valley, and one of them, he decided before they go home, he had to go to sleep. He could never get home without taking a small break. So the other man said, all right, look, I'll be here, and no harm come to us. And the other man, he lay down, and a couple of minutes here. His mouth opened, and while that other man was looking at him, what did he see? Coming out of his friend's mouth, only a white butterfly. Out it crept, down along him, down along his leg, and never flew, only crept down along his leg, down along the ground, over across this little flagstone that was crossing the small stream, down along this little pathway between these rushes, and he watched it. And where did it go? Only into this horse's skull that, by the look of it, had been there for many a day. It was white, it was weather-beaten, and the butterfly crept in one eye hole, one of the sockets of the eyes, and while the man watched it, there it was inside, going to this side and that side, over and back, until it came out again. And back between the rushes, up the little pathway, across the flagstone, across the stream, and crept back across this little path, up again to the man's leg, crept up along his leg, up across along his body, into his mouth, and then your man, his mouth closed, his eyes opened, and he sat up, and he looked around him, amazed, and he said to his friend, "What time is it? Is it time to go home?"
My name's Stephen Keneally, and I work here in the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. I also work on National Inventory of Intangible Cultural Heritage, which is related to the Unesco work that we do in our section. And I also work on some aspects of EU coordination at the cultural level. The 2003 Unesco Convention, the official name is the 2003 Unesco Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. What that is it's a UNESCO international instrument designed to protect living cultural heritage internationally, ensure that the communities and people who practice it are shown proper respect, and assist in the safeguarding of that heritage from generation to generation. So if you're in a situation where a particular tradition might be at risk of dying out, UNESCO has some means to help and make sure that it's either recorded if it's going to die otherwise, or assist in it being passed on if there's a chance of that still happening.
I think it's important that we preserve our folklore because it's all about our identity. It tells us who we are and where we've come from. And it's something that we're recognised all over the world for as storytellers, though every culture has their own characters, has their own oral tradition. But the Irish one, for such a small country, and I think the fact that we've been forced to travel and spread out around the world, it's our stories that we take with us.
It links us to one another, collective ideas and traditions, agreed world views, if you like. It adds colour, it adds meaning, it reflects a lot of our own ideas about the world around us. So in that sense, it's a very important element within society, and it's important to document and preserve that.
Then it's amazing the difference, the uses people are making of the archive. You've a lot of artwork or drama, and artists and writers coming in. Even the gamers, they draw on the folk epics and the hero tales and all that to develop that kind of material, because there are fantastic stories, and even like magic cards, for instance, use creatures like the banshee and that, and these are all being integrated into modern culture, modern pop culture in a different way. But they are being used, yeah.
I should add that folklore is changeable. New forms of folklore are being created all the time. It doesn't stand still. So there is a dynamic quality about folklore.
I think there's a genuine concern there that the stories are going to be influenced too much and too quickly, and that they're going to change. If you start seeing mobile phones being dropped into folklore and modern technology into stories themselves, but it's an old story, then that doesn't work. But if you were to look at us maybe telling the stories as they were written down and using the language how it was documented at the time, it's suddenly not relevant to the people in front of you. Especially when you look at how Ireland is such a diverse country now. We've got people from every cultural background, every belief system, and I think you have to work with the people who are in front of you. You have to look at who you want to get the message out to and how you want to do that. And as long as you have the right reason to do it, then I think it's always going to kind of keep its heart.
Folklore has an important place in Irish cultural life. That people are proud of the folklore because it represents diversity, and it's tied up with identity, and it's tied up with our understanding and our relationship with the world around us, with the landscape and so forth. It, to some degree, defines us in many ways. The more obvious expressions of that are, I suppose, music and dance. The other aspects of folklore are less tangible, they're harder to grasp, but there is, I think, an understanding of the wider importance of tradition in Ireland generally.
So it occupies an interesting place regarding intangible heritage, but fundamentally they mean it in the sense that it's something that can't be touched, can't be directly engaged with. If I make you a horseshoe, that's a very tangible element. But the skill and the craft that goes into making the horseshoe is the intangible cultural heritage. So in much the same way, the specific stories of folklore aren't intangible heritage, they aren't living heritage. But if there's a tradition of telling them and passing them on, that's living cultural heritage. That's the sort of thing that's passed from generation to generation. If you have the old craft of the shanachie, the storyteller, that's an aspect of living heritage. And if there's a particular way stories are told, that would also be living heritage.
It contains our memories, it contains our stories, it contains our interpretation of what has happened in the past. Now, the historians might disagree with it, but if it's my memory, if it's what I've lived through, it is important. And the lore of the people tells you an awful lot about the people. And if we don't keep those memories, if we don't remember what went on in the past, either in a personal sense or in terms of your family or in terms of your own story, your own life story, it's gone.
Is it time to go home? Well, said his friend, I'm after seeing the most amazing thing I ever saw in all my life. You are? Said the man of the butterfly. Well, if you're after seeing something amazing, I'm after seeing something amazing too. Tell me, says his friend. I could have swore that I was on a journey, a kind of a journey. Well, the journey I was on was, I was down and down and down along this beautiful road, and then I came between this trees and trees of forest on each side of me. I crossed this mighty bridge over the big wide river and on another road, and then I came to a palace the like of which I never saw. I went in, an open door, and I went from room to room to room, and there was nobody in it. And I began to get afraid, and I decided to be maybe better to go out of that place. I thought maybe it might be a fairy house or something like that, and I came out of it, and I came back the very, very same way as I went, through the forest, up, across this mighty bridge over this huge river, along the track, and back again to where I started. Well, I'm afraid you didn't. I'm afraid you did not, says his friend. Come here till I show you the wonderful journey you were on. And he led his friend and showed him where he had been. down the little track. Showed him between the rushes, across the little flagstone, until he came to the horse's skull. This is where you were. And he said, does a person's soul, I wonder, leave their body when they go to sleep? Because it looks the way that's what happened to you, because out of your mouth came a white butterfly. Well, if you think you saw wonders this day, it was me that saw wonders. They went home, wiser men, and it wasn't sheep that was worrying them either after their adventures, both of them.